So, I recently watched a show called Combatants Will Be Dispatched, and I was expecting probably a little too much. It's made by the same people who made Konosuba, a series I love to bits, goofy, fun, awful, but also wonderful at the same time. Characters that are memorable and interesting. I digress. This was made by the same man, at least the manga series. Animated, I don't know. But simply put, Combatants Will Be Dispatched is a very weird and complicated show in a weird way, which is why it's weird. But also it's weird. Simply put, I think Combatants Will Be Dispatched misses the mark, maybe, at the beginning. So, I feel like this is one of the shows, and I can speak to this immensely, that when I first started watching it, I was like, ah man, this is gonna be one of those shows where I have to talk about how, like, I don't know what happened. What happened? Konosuba, and then we got this. What took place? But it does achieve what I think it's trying to achieve. Also, sorry I look like Father Christmas. Also, I'm sorry. I was cold. Yeah. But yes, if you were like me, and when you got to episode 4, you were just thinking, man, I don't know why, but this isn't hitting like Konosuba did. It's the jokes are funny, but the characters are kind of just, I don't know, it almost feels like I didn't have enough time to understand, enjoy, and root for them. Because to me, that's the magic of Konosuba, which I want to make a video talking about at some point, but that show does expertly well about showing you imperfect characters that are flawed, shitty, have a bunch of baggage, but are still characters you root for, characters you want to see succeed, and characters you want to see and understand how they'll react because they're true to the character that they are. For the better and also for worse, you know? And the thing is, finish Combatants Will Be Dispatched, which is a weird name. It has nothing to do with the show at all. Okay? But I would suggest and ask all of you who have maybe watched it, not liked it. I understand if you didn't like it, because there are things that are hard to get by. But if you were one of the people that dropped it at episode 4 because you're like, it's just not doing it for me. It is a show that is, I think, made to grow on you and is unapologetic with its handling of characters and their development and the secrecy that potentially hides within them. Because similar to Konosuba, at some point you think, these are my characters. Like, they're flawed, they're shitty, they're scummy at times, they're not perfect, but they're my characters, and I want to see them do more things. Their perceptions of the world are actually perceptions of the world, governed in a different way based on their experience, which maybe is a little bit going too much into inside baseball character design. But anyways, before we get too ahead of ourselves, let me talk to you guys about the general premise of Combatants Will Be Dispatched. Essentially, this is how it goes. Essentially, we follow this evil company in a very, very futuristic world. I say evil with air quotes, just to be clear. We follow this agent called Agent 6, and he always refers to himself as like a bottom tier, nothing employee to this big corporation. But very quickly you find out that he has a relationship with the people at the very, very top of this organization, this big bad company. And the company is very much laid out in a way of like supervillain kind of shit, where by doing evil deeds, they will give you evil points. And that will allow you to have like benefits, like digistruct things, essentially, like create something from nothing. It's kind of interesting. Regardless, this evil company is looking for a new resource-rich planet. So they get this Agent 6 to go and essentially find another worthy planet, try to conquer it, try to create settlements, trying to essentially eventually let people warp in and start to dominate and control said planet. All the while, 6, our main character, is kind of like an older gentleman, which is interesting. Usually we always see like children in anime kind of popping off, but no, he's a grown man, and he is honestly, especially at the start, pretty unlikable. He's just kind of a dick. Just kind of a rude, self-serving Mickey hole. Anyways, our Agent 6 gets teleported and isekai'd, essentially, to a fairy tale wondrous planet, filled with orcs, beasts, knights, magic, all that stuff, with this little girl named Alice, who's an android. So if you have seen anything, it's essentially this grown man in a black suit and this tiny blonde girl with a shotgun. It tends to be the advertising. If you've seen that show around, that is Combatants Will Be Dispatched. Now, their objective is to basically dominate and control this new planet. And essentially, to break things down, throughout their journey, they're meeting various crazy characters. First things first is there's a girl named GRINN, who essentially is an immortal, unkillable person because she believes in a death god. And as long as she basically gets placed on this like sacrificial altar, she'll revive, even if she's obliterated. There is this knight who is like this perfect, beautiful maiden, but also happens to be the most greedy, self-serving person as well. Very similar to Six, actually. Anyways, then there's this cute little like Charmander, weird mix mash of different elements, a chimera is what they call it. She's like a dragon girl, look cute, all that stuff. And yeah, those are our characters, our Konosuba-like family of misfits, weirdos, and flawed individuals decked out to the nine. Now, the biggest problem with this show, and I want to circle back around eventually, but the biggest problem with this show is that it starts off really bad because unlike Konosuba, where we kind of get like the very kind of come up, we get to have a quick introduction of what Kazuma, damn Genshin, Kazuma's kind of story, the fact that he's kind of like a what do you call it, just kind of like a nothing burger, a person who dies for nothing and essentially gets isekai'd and all this shit, and also it's just a slow burn, just very basically like a realistic character where it's like, bitch, I don't know. What are we doing? What are we doing? Why am I the one having to hold all this burden? Eat me, okay? Life sucks. Get away from me. I don't want to have to do this. A very fair character in which there is a lot of time because you're able to see Kazuma grow into this character that is both like abrasive, self-serving, but also pretty good. Like not perfect, and that's the point. But needless to say, just to summarize it, it's hard to explain besides I feel like you resonate with those characters really quickly, really fast. And I think it's because you see the come up. You see like the very, very bottom to the very, very top of who they become. And you feel like you're like, okay, I start to understand these characters. They're making me laugh. They're funny. They're goofy. And when they're shitty, I kind of get it. Like that's a human aspect that exists within all of us, which is not even like a non-good thing. Like it's okay to be selfish when you're getting taken advantage of constantly, you know, and when the world is not in a place where you can be giving. So yeah, like all those things feel like they resonate. But then, with Combatants Will Be Dispatched, I thought this was a huge problem at the start, which is essentially they don't give you enough time to understand the main character, to give a shit about him. He's kind of shitty out the cuff. You don't really get to see any sort of like human element to him besides him just kind of being a kind of specific kind of character. And the same can be said for a lot of these characters. You don't really know enough, and they kind of just throw them at you, and you're kind of like, okay. And then you kind of feel like, I don't know if I give a shit. Like I don't think I've had time to know what I even have. So there's this feeling of like it feels like it's missing the mark. When they're making jokes, it doesn't really feel like you're rooting for these people anyway. So that's maybe a flaw to this show. But as a person who has finished the anime, which, by the way, it's a quick thing. I mentioned this probably maybe in the title. I don't know. But yes, there will be there's a high likelihood of there being a season 2. It's incredibly popular overseas in terms of just the manga, and yeah, I think it performed relatively pretty well in terms of Funimation. It's not confirmed, but all the websites I looked into said there was a high chance of there being a season 2. Which, again, as a person who's finished the show at this point, it's weird. That's how I opened the video. It's a really weird show. The reason why it's weird is because I think it achieves what it tries to do, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's doing that for you. It's not trying to be a show that is like, it's the next most lovable, wholesome show that's super engaging, super interesting, super likable to a mass audience. It seems like it's messing with this idea of evil. We have this organization that I said evil in air quotes, and they're actually like they hyper focus into stuff like that, where this evil corporation is actually fighting heroes on Earth. But if you look at like general society, it's gotten a technological boom. It seems like people have things to do, reasons to do them, all those kinds of things. And the people at the very top of the brass, like the bosses, essentially, the corporation entities, they don't seem to be bad-hearted, cruel people. At best, they're a little self-serving, but is that really that bad? Anyway, so from the very beginning, you get this idea of like, it's all about like evil villain culture, except it doesn't seem evil, and nothing really shows it being demonstrous. So for me, I feel, and it's funny because I feel like the subliminal thing throughout this entire show is talking to that, about, is a character really shitty? Like, or like, is the way a person acts, speaks, really relevant to someone's moral character? Now, we might be going way too overhead with this, but I feel like that's kind of a subliminal thing, especially within the corporation, where if you finish the show, I feel like the corporation that you've seen in the background doesn't seem evil, although it constantly makes itself seem that way. And I think I wrote it down just to kind of echo a point. Simply put, we don't have enough time to care or understand Six, to root for him. But that may be the point. Let me explain. This show messes with the perception of evil, but at no point does anything really bad happen, or they do anything really bad. At best, it's doing something bad for a kind of a nice end, and that's literally Six. Six really never does anything demonstrous. He does something demonstrous because he kind of has to, or he feels like it's like it's a justifiable evil in a weird way. It's almost like this organization is saying, it's easier if you think we're evil, so that we don't waste time trying to explain why we're trying to save you. That seems very much like that's the premise of the entire show. Morally, like, I think it's just messing around with the idea of evil and bad people. So in this instance, the organization is trying to find a new resource-rich planet for Earth. It seems like it's created an incredible technological advancement, and it seems like it's found a way to cater. I don't know, because they've never ever given an example of like true demonstrous evil shit. It's just people being comfortable with their supposed demons that are not actually demons. They're like a proclivity to want to dress in a certain way, to think that people should be a certain kind of way. Nothing to the point in which it's like horrible, like, you know, like torturing somebody. Like a lot of like the shittiness of Alice and Six is them like doing something that's maybe a little morally fucky, but also has like a huge yield for like less death, less horrible shit. But also they're not like opposed to just being fucking brutal and murdering things. Like there's a whole episode of that where he just obliterates everyone in this area. So it's not like there's that. It's complicated. So now let's talk about Six. This is really, really interesting because, again, the show starts and they kind of just throw you at Six and you're kind of just like, I don't know, he's kind of an old asshole. He's kind of just an old douche, you know? But, anyways, I wrote down this. Six is unapologetically him, and that is unbearable at points. But with time, that makes him complex and understandable, and a good way to put it is, to him, he is number one. And because of that, he does not play stupid games like getting others to like him. He is him, and he likes himself just fine. And if you don't, that's your loss. And by having that mentality, he can help others with and without strings attached. What I mean by that is expectations of success or failure. Meaning, he'll help, but there's like, I rarely feel like he feels like he actually loses, because his expectations are set appropriately. It's almost like, I'll try. If I get something out of it, then awesome. If I don't, then well, I'll try less. Or like it's a very human approach to like problems, and like hey, I want to get mine, but at the same time, when something rings like in my head or in my heart or in my gut, I gotta be like, fuck, fine. Expectations of success or failure doesn't matter to him. So when he fails, it's kind of just taking an L, and he takes it pretty well. When he succeeds, he kind of just succeeds, and it's only a little bit different than him losing. So it's like, he doesn't seem like he gets the expectations caught up in shit too much. He's not like, I'm going to win because I'm a winner. No. If anything, is like, I get shit on constantly, and I'm just looking to survive. I'm just looking to move forward. And that's pretty charming. But again, when I say he's a complex character, there's things that they do throughout the show that's really, really creative and I think and interesting. So one of the things is that Six constantly refers to himself as like a bottom tier, basic bitch, kind of never gotten a promotion in the company kind of person. But then as the show progresses, you start to learn that, wait, maybe it's not that Six didn't get a promotion, but it's that Six never accepted a promotion or asked to get promoted. And then in the second episode, they drop kind of a bombshell on you where Six was like one of the founders of the entire company, and somehow he erased his past or some sort of weird thing, or basically chose to live for a different reason. I hope there's backstory there somewhere. And also in this like evil corporation, I think he is what they would like the perfect personification of what is human, which is like, it's okay to want to make it so that you get yours. You know what I mean? It's also good that you want to make sure you're doing good for the general populace, even if it's self-serving, even if it's like, hey, if everyone wins, then no one's gonna come and try to rip my throat out because everybody's winning. Also, it's fair to say, you idiot, if you do not get out of that area, you're gonna die. And then you see a person die, a person die, a person die, and then you think, you either give up or you say, fuck it, I'm gonna rip you out of that area that's gonna get hit by a boulder, a meteor, or whatever. And that's exacting your will onto others and maybe could be perceived as evil. But in the show, it seems like that's the line of like they don't care, or they're not hindered by the perception of others thinking that they are away. That they are evil, that they are greedy, that they are whatever. In fact, they take on that mantle and they try to do what they know or think is worth doing. And that to me is a really interesting concept and is executed kind of, but it's not executed, at least obviously, within the first couple episodes. It's only till you start getting towards the end where you realize that these people are actually doing a lot of good. And yeah, maybe there's something in the manga which everyone's like, Grin, you're so off. It's literally like, here's the evil guys, but it's funny. And I'm like, oh, okay. But nah, because then what's 6? And why is, also, just to finish my train of thought, one of the things that they say in episode 2 is that 6 is essentially like the premium candidate to become the overlord. So the super low on the totem pole guy who's never gotten a promotion, but is like super chummy with the top 3, the top big like corporative presidential people. They all 3 of them kind of agree that 6 would make the best overlord, and if he completes this weird like save humanity from themselves kind of thing, they're going to basically give him the crown, which is like a big mic drop moment, and you're kind of like, what? Like maybe there's just a lot of backstory, maybe they're like really good friends, which is seemingly present, but no, as the show progresses, you start to realize, oh no, 6 is actually like an interesting moral point of interest, and it's hard to describe, like, because it doesn't explain things out for you perfectly, but it's present, like it's super present, that 6 is actually a pretty, I'm not sure if he's not morally good, but I feel like he would be the person that would be the best for your success, if that makes any sense. So there's plenty of times for the series where people, like especially in this kingdom, where there's like honor, knights, demon king, a prophecy of a hero. There's all this shit. And the show kind of, again, just similar to Konosuba, kind of brutalizes all of these things, making fun of them. But largely, I think it talks to that weird, like, thing where, again, 6 throughout the course is told that he's, like, an actual bad guy, he's a demon, he's a piece of shit, when there's, like, these creepy, gross politicians that are slimy, gross, and, like, manipulative, and supposedly good, when, 6 is essentially willing to do what it takes to succeed and to win. So there's been plenty of times where he was like, yeah, we'll just burn them all alive. Like, he's like, so they're like, there's a great moment where they're trying to fight these people in this tube, and it's kind of like a Tower of Babel kind of staircase going upwards, and there's a bunch of demons, scattered downwards. And of course, this is a fantasy realm, and 6 and Alice is an android, and they come from a futuristic future, so they have kind of like tech. If they are able to get evil points, so that's allowing 6 to do some evil shit, but it's not really evil, it's just kind of like weird crimes, like showing genitals, which yes is gross and not great, but it's not like murder, you know. And if he always uses it to like kind of like make it so that less potential death happens. But the thing is that he's not like a holier than thou good person. Like if he kills people, he doesn't like blink an eye. His only moral quandary, which gets crushed eventually, is that he doesn't want to be a cannibal. He doesn't want to eat a person with intelligence, or he doesn't want to eat something with intelligence. And then he ends up eating orc forcibly because he's gonna die if he doesn't. But anyways, there's this Tower of Babel like thing, and there's a bunch of people just saying like, we're knights, we have honor, we're gonna push right on through. And then there's like a bunch of shit where it's like, no one has ever beaten the demons in this realm because it's just like a stairway full of them. Like, it's like, what? But then 6 comes in and says, how about we just firebomb the top and like burn everyone going down. So he's like, start a fire at the bottom and just burn it all up. And they're like, how can we do that? That's insane. Like, well, that's so evil. And then he's kind of just like, Like, what are you guys talking about? Like, this is like, you guys are dying by droves, and like there's death all, like, I don't understand. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't. It doesn't make any sense. Long story short, he ends up climbing to the top, like kicking somebody down, holding somebody hostage. But if the net end result is like more good being done, less death, and maybe perceived evil by this person doing morally unjust things, when none of it really seems all that morally unjust, with like, at best it seems uncomfortable, like that's it. But it seems like Six's end goal would be the best end goal, where the least amount of death happens, the least amount of suffering took place, and yeah. But the other thing is that Six is 100% self-serving, in a very interesting way. It's not that he doesn't like care for others, because he does. There's plenty of times in the show that he does that, but it does seem like he is not selfless. Like, he's not gonna die. That's my favorite part about him, honestly, is that I think at the end of the day, Six would live, which to me, all of these characteristics, and this is a really fucking weird, like, morally thing. I think this makes sense for what the other incredibly intelligent peak like units. I think it's like 1, 2, and 3, and then there's 6. So we haven't met the other ones yet, I think. But I think this is what they see in him, and then this is why he is like the premium candidate for them, like being the overlord essentially. If they're like an evil giant corporation, it would make sense that the leader would be Six. The reason why is because Six is self-serving enough to survive and not die. He makes it so that he tries to make it so that everybody else wins and everyone else flourishes. And then even though people may have a little bit of suffering, the end result of suffering is actually nothing in the grand scheme of things. He's totally okay with being the big bad guy, and yeah. Also, one thing that we're not talking about, which is actually really well done, is eventually they make you give a shit. So again, the biggest problem with this show, which could be its intention, is that it doesn't try to spoon feed you these characters. In fact, you're gonna start off probably thinking they're kind of interesting, but kind of annoying, a little shitty, overbearing, flawed, and you don't even know their goodness, the good parts of them, cringe, all that shit. And then eventually, I can confidently say I really like all of them. And honestly, I don't know about this, but like I kind of feel like I connect more with them than I do Konosuba to some weird extent, just because they're all, I don't know. I think it just speaks, like, in Konosuba, they're kind of goofy and flawed, and that's good but they're also like good people, and they happen to aim for being, or maybe not good people. That's the wrong way to put it, but they're not bad people, is the best way I could describe it. They're flawed people, and they're, again, if you look at the sum whole of their actions, they're actually making a pretty good amount of good in the world. They're not like amplifying like badness. At best, they have some like low points where they do something maybe not so great, where that's self-serving, but at the end of the day, if you look at their overall good, they're actually pretty good, and their bad is not that bad. And they're also, they have like weird characteristics, like one being super masochistic or whatever, right? And one like that getting in the way of being whatever. I don't know. I think it's, again, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, I actually like think this show is incredibly clever, and I think it executes itself better than I thought. Because again, at episode 4, I was like, I'm gonna tell these people that this is the show that like hella disappointing. Like, I'm like, what happened? What happened to Konosuba? You made this. What was the what? But then as the show progresses, the more I'm like, I actually really like these characters. I'm actually rooting for them now. I actually can't wait to see what kind of weird idea they introduce. And yeah, and all the characters I think is awesome. Grim, you start off kind of being confused by, but then you start to understand. And she's like pretty one-dimensional. She's essentially a really lonely, like goth creep, essentially. But also she's kind, and she cares about her friends, and she doesn't want to be left behind. Like, these are all traits that most people can understand and empathize with. It's also, and I think that might be the whole course, is maybe as human beings we demonize certain emotions, like selfishness, self-servingness, the ability to not want to be alone, or the ability to feel slighted, or maybe even greed. We see all of these things as kind of bad and like horrible things, and sometimes these are at the root of people's kind of being. But I think the lesson of the show is that people are more than those things, and those things don't necessarily define you as being a bad or evil person. I think whether you let those things consume you entirely or you start drinking too much of your own bullshit, then it starts becoming bad. And maybe even in some extent, you know how there's like the 7 deadly sins and there's like the 7 heavenly virtues or whatever it's called? Sorry, I'm not sure about all those. But it almost feels like in the mythological sense, in like the fantasy realm, a lot of the like hero, the king, a lot of these other people who are considered to be having good virtues are not the people that actually can push the envelope forward. It's almost like you need all things. You need to be both evil in these specific ways and to have these characteristics, and to also have people who are good to have both of them survive and thrive. Yeah. It's a weird show. I'm not sure if that's we're kind of getting a little above ground. Like a person could come in and be like, I was just trying to make a funny comedy, and you're hyper diagnosing it. I'm like, fair. I'm just enjoying the show. And I'm trying to understand why I did so much. And again, I can't describe how it was a turn for me. Like I was watching it, I thought it was like pretty lame, pretty boring. I didn't really connect with the characters, and then boom. Eventually, I was like, okay. No, they're starting to get to me. I think it's because it wears you out. As long as you stay on this ride, eventually you'll want to go around again and again and again and again and again. And eventually you really like these characters. You really connect with these characters, and specifically in the ways that they're imperfect. Kind of similar to Kinsuba, except for me, Kazuma is kind of a person just trying to like interface, survive, manage, deal, and just move and go through the paces. And essentially, at a baseline, Kazuma wants a nice life and is kind of always thrust in by his own blunders sometimes into a rough, chaotic life. And he sometimes has to do good, bad things to get through it all. Whereas in this one, it has the subtext of like, we are an evil corporation that is evil, and we have like systems in play like evil points that reward evil actions. But yet none of the people really seem to be all that evil. And I wonder if it's because in the future they're in such a high state of abundance and success that you don't really need to be demonstrously cruel. You can just be a little shitty, and you can honestly have a pretty interesting and fun life for that, because if you have a friend that's ever razzed you, or you doing the razzing, or any sort of weird shit like that, it actually might have a net in like good result. And maybe that's what the corporation is really based on, is having a better result than prior. So, you know, evilness and titles be damned, as long as there's a net good or a net positive outcome, then fuck it. But yes, that's the like overhead, my dumbass kind of pondering into the craziness of the whole thing, and how I kind of really started to like the characters. The character to me that I really like haven't talked about at all. I love Grimm. Grimm's my favorite character. I called her out, but think she's fucking awesome. Like, she's super iconic, lovable, interesting, weird. I like weird a lot, and she's fucking peak weird. And there's the like classic sword maiden, who's also flawed but interesting. Chimera is kind of just like one-dimensional, cute, childlike, whatever, you know. But Alice is also incredibly fantastic, because again, I think that was the turning point for me personally. I think when like you start seeing Six and you start seeing all this weird bullshit, and then you start seeing like Six in a kind of a better light, but then you have this girl named Alice, who's this android, who's his kind of partner or companion, and she's always quite cold and numb and like analytical. But eventually Six, like, just by going through experiences and being by each other's side, eventually there's a turning point where Six even like completely, like, I don't know if anyone could shake this thought of him where it's like, no, you're my partner, you're my, like, the person that made me survive up to this point. I'm betting on you. You're my friend, partner, whatever. And it's that point where Alice kind of starts to look at everything kind of differently and look at it like, these are my people. I gotta keep my people safe, good. She's got like the weird den mother, but also she's an android, so she doesn't really feel like an abundance of crazy emotion. It seems like, again, she's way more like good job, Six, you did some evil shit, but basically we're saved. So go team, you know? Or she'll talk down to him not doing enough evil things, and it's all quite enjoyable. And man, just to gush a little bit, topic of Alice, the ending, dude, oh my god, the ending to me was in an anime that's all about like evil, cruel, like not cruel, but like dastardly, kind of like evil villain plan. It very much feels like the evil villain that has no intention on causing damage, but still wants to get his way. With that being said, there are a few moments where there's a lot of death, where like just kills a bunch of orcs and demons, like fucking mad, and you're kind of just like, or not really. You're kind of like, all right, whatever, because it's an anime, but. The ending man in a world that's like, or in a show that's all about like evil points and corporations and like, it's okay to be a kind of a scumbag and make sure you get yours on occasion, or else you'll get taken advantage of. And people are flawed and beautiful at the same time, and that's kind of a part of life. Anyways, the ending where what do you call it? Six kind of like truly acknowledges Alice and says like, okay, we're gonna pull this home. He basically shows that he's like a combat agent 6. Like, there's another reason why people are saying that, or like his like bosses are saying that he's going to be their boss one day. He's going to be their top head overlord like person, because he is like a combat agent. He is a person that also is self-serving enough to survive. He's also selfless enough to care for others and to want others to get theirs and succeed as well. He's also a realist. He's about what will be the least suffering, what will get me the most, and how can my people be okay, and how can I go forward doing that, and also how do I, again, self-serving enough doesn't just mean like make sure he stays alive. That means make sure that he's satisfied, and make sure he has his at the end of the day as well. Anyways, at the ending, man, he shows that he's a bad bitch and just starts laying into like just shooting a bunch of guns. He doesn't really make a dent. Actually, makes a dent. He makes a dent. Alice saves the day though with her absurd technology and brain. And again, they kind of make this joke where Alice is the brain of the operation and Six is the muscle. And I think it's kind of like a 50-50 split, because Alice is good about making plans and Six is really good about like improvising and knowing the leverage point to get the most yield, the most gain for bang for his buck kind of thing. Anyways, the show ends with basically in a moment like one of the things that's like cringe a little bit to me, which is like cringe is like hard to look at, unenjoyable, and hard to be found endearing. I guess in this case, it's Six when he's like persuading women. It just seems confusing, although it kind of makes sense because it seems like he has this deep love for his boss kind of situation, because they kind of grew the company together, it seems like, or they were a part of growing the company together, and there's like things there. It's really cringe when like Six is like, there's all these girls around him and he's just kind of like everything's going really well, and then he'll like self-sabotage, probably because he really likes the other person. But anyways, he'll be like just a creep or a pig for no reason, and you're like, okay, or at least Kazuma, I get it. Like, it seems like you're just kind of like you're bad at this, but also I get it. Like, he's like, I'm gonna die tomorrow. Like, I could die tomorrow from demons and whatever. Kazuma's like, best I could do is sex. I can't get emotionally invested in anything. Okay? And I'm like, that's fair. That's a fair point, honestly. All that weird cringiness aside, there's Alice. And Alice is like a weird android like girl, and honestly they kind of talk about uncomfortable conversations within the show. One of them is a little too much for me with the Chimera. Kind of like a vampire, a 400-year-old vampire that has, yeah, a body that's yucky. Anyway, but Alice is like literally an android, and she's like supremely more intelligent than her, and they refer to her having upgrades where she could become whatever you want. They could make her a fully grown woman. They could make her a man. It doesn't really matter. With the future and her being an android, it's like the soul of this bot, this android, that is Alice, essentially. Regardless, the ending is like incredibly beautiful because Alice 100% kind of starts to understand Six, to the point where she's like, yeah, I know, I don't really like, you're my partner, and and she literally cleaned up his piss and shit while he was in like a weird like week-long coma, which is hilarious because they never talk about that in like shows where like, you've been unconscious for 4 weeks. And just like, who's the person like taking care of you? Anyways, Alice quite literally was taking care of him this entire time, and she makes the sweetest compliment or comment ever. She's like, you're my partner, Six. When all is said and done, at the end of the day, when you're old and withered, I'll still be here taking care of you. And she says it with a straight face, and I feel like Six even is like thrown off like, yeah, like, wow. And also, like, you just cleaned up my piss and shit for 3 days, and also you saved my ass, and you've always stood by my side, even though we're like in danger and shit. Yeah, like there's so many times in shows where like someone will say something and you're like, yeah, that's just like none of your like previous actions show that you would do this. And in a show that is all about like shitty people kind of like it's okay to be shitty. It's okay to not want to fight a war that's not yours to fight. And it's constantly kind of giving a light to those kinds of ideas of like, hey, it's okay for you to be like, this is not fair, and I don't want any of this to do anything with this. You don't have to be the hero. It's okay. For a show that does that constantly, to have this beautiful, like sacred, wondrous moment, which is like the most wholesome you could get, like Futurama ending fucking wholesome, in terms of the overall meaning of it all. Is just wonderful. And of course they ruin it really quick just to make sure you were watching the same show. They ruin it, and then like he gets all creepy again. But even still, Alice like weathers the storm of his bullshit really effortlessly. So, and it very much feels like kind of, if you watch like later seasons of Konosuba, where like you kind of get a sense that like Aqua and Kazuma are always gonna kind of be like a unit and together and etc. I don't know if it's gonna be romancy shit. That's where things kind of like make little sense, and even like it seems like it doesn't even matter. Like just the idea that this person who basically says, "Yeah, I'll stand by your side forever," and also is not like motivated by sexual things because she's an android, right? It's just there's some weird wholesomeness to that, and like some sort of weird beauty in that. And again, like Six gets rocked by that kind of, but he also, again, like nicely actually is like, yeah, you're probably right. At that point there was kind of like an underlying pin of like, does Six realize how much like when he referred to this android as his partner, when she only thinks of herself as like this automaton that's supposed to achieve a directive, when he finally says like, no, I see you as more than like just this bot. I see you as my friend, this partner, this thing I want to have by my side, this thing that's equal to me, because partner is ideally, equal to you. Anyways, that meant a lot to her, and the whole series I was like, I hope he thinks the same way. I hope he didn't just say that on a one-off comment. And the more you learn about Six, the more I don't think that's true, although I think he would be like, yeah, I was totally bullshitting you. Like, that's just who he is, and the kind of way he sees things. Anyway, the ending is like unparalleled wholesomeness in a show that's all about being gratuitous and excessive, essentially. But I don't know, I am like incredibly interested in the season 2, and again, I cannot tell you guys how much this show is a whiplash, where at first I was super down the path of this is going to be shitty, it's going to be boring, I don't care about the characters, they're not really likable, they're not even like unlikable in a likable way, or why the hell do I like Kazuma but not this guy? Six, what's that about? Everyone kind of seems a little shitty, but the more you think about it, the more it kind of like, oh, I kind of see what you're doing, and I actually am more into it now. Kind of makes me feel like Mob Psycho 100% when you understand the subplot and the overarching moral theme of the whole show, and ideas of the show. It kind of becomes a little bit better, and you're able to kind of like soak in and enjoy more of it. But eventually, I think they do hook you eventually with the characters. Now, if you really decided like, I've watched 4 episodes, I hate it, it's shitty, you've been telling yourself, I hate it, it's shitty, it's a trash, it's boring, it's annoying, it's not charming, then yeah, it probably will be really hard to de-wire that, to like go backwards. But from a person that tried to keep an open mind and then eventually found the turn, the flip, I think you might be satisfied if you go back and watch it again, because I do think it is a show that ramps up and eventually wins you over. And I think it's also potentially the kind of show that's not trying to win you over at the start. The show is trying to show you these kind of characters that are shitty, scummy, self-serving, and then only as you watch do you realize that all of those actions kind of make sense and are honestly not determined and don't determine them to be bad people, but yeah, like it makes sense why they do what they do because of what they kind of believe and what the company very well might preach. Although I could be inferring too much. Regardless, it is a funny show. It's weird. It has cool ideas. It kind of messes with the whole tropes of like heroism, not heroism, all that. Evilness, corporations, outcomes versus moral feelings about doing things to get said outcomes, and all these things. Very interesting. I very much like the show. Combatants Will Be Dispatched is the worst name ever because it doesn't describe anything and it's just too long. It's like both too long and doesn't describe anything. So yeah, if they just said 6 and that was the name, I would think that would be good. Or 6 and Android or Android and 6, whatever, that would be more like makes sense because that's literally what it is. It's like Android and 6, that's the main unit thing. And also they talk about like And I don't think they're gonna do it because I think that the manga is wrapped up at this point. But they do talk about essentially like this going on for kind of ever. Like 6 will always go to new planets, redominate them with the android, and like keep doing that until he gets old and dies. But I don't think 6 knows the plan for the big brass, like his bosses, to basically promote him to being the king or the overlord. But that could have also just been a one-off comment that they just threw it in there just to be like, hey, 6 is more than he looks, so start keeping an eye on him and look at his general actions rather than his specific shitty take on a lot of things. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, I think they did it again. I think this animator, I was coming in here going to be like, he failed, but then I finished the anime and I was like, no, he succeeded again. He succeeded in making me root for, care about, and be able to understand characters deep enough to where I can know what they're going to do before they do it. And that's really hard to do in TV shows and shows, especially when you're dealing with flawed characteristics. You're not just dealing with like, the hero's always going to do the good option. The bad guy's always going to do the bad option. No, it's like, oh no, I know what Kazuma is gonna do because he's Kazuma. I know what Darkness is gonna do because of Darkness. I know what 6 is gonna do because he's 6. I know what the android's gonna do because I know she's an android and the way she thinks and the way she kind of prioritizes things. I know that at this point. And throughout the journey, you kind of get that much of a deep understanding for these characters, and that is incredible. Regardless, ladies and gentlemen, I would highly advise you finish, because I think a lot of people started the show and maybe didn't finish it, or maybe at the very least didn't. I don't know if even I'm correct on picking up on the subliminal message of this evil, this like shittery essentially about like characteristics that are actually not that shitty, and ultimately seems like they always have a good or better outcome than the prior. Hence the example of the Tower of Babel kind of situation, where they, again, just to do one bad act would save your soldiers, would honestly save the demons who don't even care about you living or dying, and honestly cause less death, because I think he actually just got them to leave. He just got them to fucking, like, actually leave. So yeah, by holding a hostage. So less death actually happened with the Tower of Babel, because he held hostages and he got them to fucking leave. Who would have thought? It's a good way to, like, that's the best possible outcome. Less death, less misery, and a pretty good damn show. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, I may be referring to too much into this. Regardless, I would love to hear what you think about the show. I feel like I might get some people being like, no, GRINN, it was just bad. And I'm like, okay. I don't know. I'm excited if there were going to be a season 2. I do think it makes sense why some people don't like it, because it is, in my opinion, doing something that's a little dangerous, where it's not trying to make the character likable at the start, show you that he's shitty, and then show you that that's kind of okay. Instead, it's like, no, here's a shitty character, I'm going to make you dislike them, and then as time progresses, I'm going to slowly show you that that character is actually wonderful because they're kind of shitty and imperfect. And behind their shittery is actually a pretty good person who's doing a lot of net good, and is accepting the flawed within all of us. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, hopefully you guys do enjoy the rest of your day. We also stream quite a lot on YouTube. Here's the given times right here. Here's also 2 videos over that way. Check those out if you so desire. Thank you so much for hearing me ramble about anime. Love you to bits. Hopefully I can see you again when next we talk about some anime. Bye.